Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congressman Pat Harrigan, member of the For Country Caucus. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
Brittany, thanks for having me. Good to be with you today.
It is good to be with you, especially news just broke a little less than an hour ago, so we have a wide-ranging conversation in store. But before we get to that, I do want to talk about some legislation that you introduced earlier this month. It would prohibit businesses owned by certain foreign adversaries from operating on U.S. military bases. To start off the conversation, can you talk to us about the inspiration behind the legislation?
I think everybody knows broadly we've been trying very hard in Congress to find a way to prohibit our adversaries, including the Chinese Communist Party, from purchasing land around our military bases. What we have overlooked is where they are already operating on our military bases. And that's actually the point of the Military Installation Retail Security Act, which is taking any country or any company that is owned by a foreign adversarial nation, whether that's China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea, and making sure that they cannot operate from our military bases. It seems like common sense, but unfortunately, this is something that was overlooked in our government, and we are overlooking it no longer. We are going to take a company that we identified that's wholly owned by the Chinese Communist Party, that's GNC, the supplement company, and we are going to remove them from our military bases.
You're saying that this was overlooked. I mean, how did this come to your attention? Talk to us about that.
Well, someone came to our office and actually said that a good portion of the product that GNC sells is manufactured in China. And so we started to look into that. But through that investigation process and the due diligence, we actually discovered that GNC is owned by a company called Harrigan Pharmaceuticals, which is a company that's wholly owned by the Chinese Communist Party. How this actually happened and how it played out at 83 different retail locations on our military installations is actually just kind of an exploitation of a hole that was in our system. GNC got onto our military bases as a wholly owned U.S. company. Then in 2018, it sold 40% of its company, a minority stake, to Harrigan Pharmaceuticals. In 2020, GNC actually went bankrupt, and Harrigan bought the remaining 60% out of the bankruptcy process. There was no review or oversight with respect to a Chinese Communist Party owned company operating on our military bases, because when the initial sweep was done, it was an American-owned company. We're fixing that through the Military Installation Retail Security Act with respect to GNC, but we are also going to force base concessions and AFEs to do a review of all of the concession contractors that are underneath their purview to make sure that we don't have anyone else besides GNC that fits into this category.
So there are from what you're saying, over 80 different GNC locations on different military bases across the U.S. What concerns do you have specifically about GNC? Is there any indication that the CCP is infiltrating the military bases through the GNC locations, or is this more of a preemptive measure?
Is the bottom line. GNC says that information is not being transmitted back to China. But this is very similar to the argument that TikTok is making, effectively asking the folks in the United States to just trust them, that they have our best interests in mind. I think that's a bridge too far when we're talking about our military service members, particularly as I was at Fort Bragg this weekend. There's actually 4 different locations where GNC is operating on Fort Bragg. And Fort Bragg, as many people know, is home to our special operations forces. Some of them most elite special operators are based out at Fort Bragg. And so just the access and the placement, the availability and potentiality to abuse the information of our service members and use that for personal or intelligence or somehow any type of state action as they decide to build targets in this country, it just seems like a bridge too far. I think we all are free and fair marketers in this country. You have the right to sell to whoever you want to in this country. But I think that it just goes beyond common sense that if you sell to the Chinese Communist Party, that you're still allowed to operate on our military bases. I think that's just more risk than we can accept here, Brittany.
You alluded to it, but I do want to read what GNC CEO Michael Costello did say, according to Bloomberg. They're reporting he said this, quote, "Our Chinese ownership sees no personal information, and in fact, they have zero access to our data and our networks." And he also added this, "Nothing gets transferred to China in terms of personal information or other data." Do you not believe that, or you're saying, hey, it is not even worth the risk?
It's not even worth the risk. I mean, look, when they're telling the American people, our Chinese ownership takes your privacy very seriously. I don't think that we can take that seriously as someone that is operating on our military bases with access to our military personnel. That's just a bridge too far. We are not about, allowing folks to take advantage, particularly our adversaries, to take advantage of our country, let alone our troops on our own military bases. GNC needs to leave our military installations.
What's interesting is you started this conversation by saying this was overlooked. Are there any other retailers from foreign adversaries like China, Iran, Russia, or North Korea that have companies that are operating on military bases aside from GNC?
We don't know. And that's actually part of what the Military Installation Retail Security Act is going to study. It's going to force Department of Defense to study this and say, okay, hey, let's do a big, huge sweep of all of our contracts, all of our contractors, and make sure that they don't have foreign adversarial ties to countries that have intentions that are completely averse to ours, so that they do not and don't have the access and placement to take negative actions against our country and against our service members. It seems like a pretty common sense approach to me.
Congressman, I feel really lucky in my conversations with members like yourself of the For Country Caucus. It's a bipartisan group of members of Congress who are veterans. Do you have bipartisan support with this legislation, especially when it comes to that caucus?
So we are actually pursuing it right now. All of the feedback that we've had so far is completely universal. This is something that we actually just put in and filed independently, because the likely vehicle for this is actually just to go into the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the big, huge document that controls our nation's defense spending every year. And so that would end up going in, it would get included in the NDAA. This could absolutely be a standalone suspension bill where we suspend the rules and take it directly to the floor, because it should have such bipartisan support. This is a 90% issue. I think everybody takes the security of our troops very, very seriously. And so far, we've had nothing but positive feedback about what we've discovered and what we've decided to do about it.
Congressman, I would love to have you back on, and as the bill develops and as there are more action on this, I would love to have you on and talk about it. I do now want to make a bit of a left turn and talk about some breaking news. President Trump, in his stunning reversal, announced on the same day that they went into effect a 90-day pause on all tariffs except on China. He ratcheted those up to 125% on Chinese imports. So I do want to get to the escalation when it comes to China in a second, but what do you think about the 90-day pause?
I think this is indicative that President Trump is achieving what he set out to achieve. I think that there's no question, there's been wide reporting that over 70 countries that were tariffed have called President Trump, have engaged in multiple discussions with his administration about lowering the barriers to American exports that we don't have in this country with respect to their imports. And so President Trump's entire design throughout this changing of the economic process of how trade is going to be conducted moving forward is designed to level the playing field so that foreign countries respect their ability to trade with us as much as we've respected their ability, our ability to trade with them over the last 40 years. That's had very demonstrable, pernicious effects on our middle class, particularly our manufacturing middle class. I think as we well know at this point, between 2001 and 2018, America lost 3.7 million jobs just to our trade deficit alone. 75% of those job losses came from the manufacturing sector. We have got to reverse this curse of our country's inability to manufacture. I think President Trump has made strong progress towards achieving that goal, and that's why you are seeing this pause at this time.
The market was very happy at this pause. Both the Dow Jones and NASDAQ both jumped 1,000 points after President Trump announced the pause. But since Liberation Day, global markets have lost trillions. Fears of a recession really ratcheted up and stocks plunged. As of now, what did the president achieve from this? I mean, what did other countries that we know right now, what did they come to the table with? Are there any concessions that we see as of now?
Well, from what we've seen from the reporting that has played out over the last week, all these different countries are coming to the table, like Israel and Argentina, Cambodia and Vietnam, and they're saying, look, we want a 0-0 relationship with the United States. You all have treated us so well. We're going to start now treating your companies well and give them the ability to export from the United States to our country. And that's what President Trump wanted, right? That gives our manufacturing sector actual power on the global playing field of trade that we have not had for 40 years, as really poor trade policy has effectively sold out our manufacturing industry to foreign countries that used low labor rates, artificially low labor rates in many cases, because their industries are subsidized by their governments or their currencies are manipulated. And coming down to a 0-0, that's the fair trade that President Trump has been looking for.
And do you think we will see get in writing that 0-0 from a slew of countries? I mean, will we get that from those some 70 countries that have called to the White House already, according to the Trump administration?
I think that we're absolutely on pace to get that. Certainly, it's been reported that we are getting that with a number of countries. And I think that President Trump isn't going to let us put off the gas with these other countries unless they do that. I think he's very clearly shown that he is willing to take this a lot farther than people anticipated than he would, and a much, much farther than the foreign governments, particularly our adversaries, thought that he would. I think China is getting that message absolutely loud and clear, as they have not come to the table in good faith. They have simply retaliated. And President Trump's not going to put up with that. And so in addition to putting a pause on these tariffs, he also put a 125% tariff on China, not just a 104% tariff like it was yesterday. And that's in response to China not coming to the table in good faith. As we know, they are our greatest adversary. They are the greatest currency manipulator in the world. They have truly put barrier after barrier up in front of American companies, preventing them from doing business in China. We have not done the same thing with preventing China from doing business in the United States. It's about darn time that they actually start showing us some respect, and President Trump is demanding that.
In this escalation with China, you're seeing this tit for tat. Like you said, President Trump did announce that 125% tariff escalation after China announced their retaliation. When you're seeing this, won't that hurt the American consumer? Won't that hurt small businesses in America, at least in the short term?
No, what's really hurt America is 40 years of terrible trade policy that sold high-skilled, high-paying jobs out to foreign countries like China that do not share our values. And in exchange, we got low cost of goods and unskilled work that doesn't pay very much in this country. It has absolutely hollowed out our middle class. It has destroyed our manufacturing middle class. That has taken 40 years to get to where we are right now. And that middle class, that manufacturing middle class, finally has a president that's willing to stand up for them and rewrite the rules of the game so that they have the conditions set for them to be successful in the United States again. And I think that's exactly what is happening through this process.
Congressman, earlier this week, one of your Republican colleagues, Congressman Don Bacon, he introduced bipartisan legislation, the Trade Review Act of 2025, that would give Congress more power when it comes to tariffs. Is this something you support? Because this is what he said. The Constitution makes it very clear Congress has control of taxes, and let's be candid, tariffs are a tax.
Well, look, the Constitution does make it clear. However, we also have the ability to delegate that authority. And in this regard, Congress has done that. We have deferred to the President of the United States, and I wholeheartedly agree with the plan that he has charted. This is 100% the most productive thing that any president has done for the American middle class in 40 years. There's absolutely no question about it. I am not going to be one that stands in the way of protecting our manufacturing middle class, making sure that we reshore American manufacturing. Because look, at the end of the day, Brittany, if we cannot produce things in this country, we are worthless, truly worthless, and we are incapable of defending ourselves. And so I think that what has developed over the last week and a half, you're going to start to see the payoff of that really tough action that President Trump took in the form of increased opportunity for American manufacturing as well as American exports.
Do you think, though, I know you're very supportive of this, but do you think that is the right way to negotiate? I mean, I was talking to economists as earlier as this morning, right before the reversal, and they were calling this a tariff-induced recession. That's where we were hurtling towards. You saw the markets really plunge and nosedive. You saw global markets lose trillions. Is that the way to negotiate?
If people paid any attention to what happened in my district over the last 30 years, as American manufacturing was systematically hollowed out because business owners were incentivized to cut all of their American labor and send it all overseas because they could bring it back into this country just a little bit cheaper. What that did is that created a massive debt crisis for our middle class because they weren't seeing those high-paying wages that they were seeing in the past. They were not being rewarded for their labor of high skill. Those high-skilled jobs turned into low-skilled stocking jobs that paid very little or stocking our Walmart shelves across the country. That is actually where the pernicious effect has been building over the last 40 years. And the fact that we actually have now someone and a policy that is very clear about who it's prioritizing. It is prioritizing the American middle class and America's ability to produce things in this country. That, if achieved, and I believe President Trump is achieving it, will set the conditions for this country's stock market to absolutely flourish like it never has before. And so look, the market's very pliable, right? The market's responding in the very short term to uncertainties about how the rules of the game are going to be played moving forward. As that clarity comes into focus, the market's got to bounce back. And if the conditions are better for our economy to be more successful when this is done, people are going to be thanking President Trump, and that's exactly what I think they're going to be doing.
Congressman, I really appreciate the conversation today. I hope we can have plenty more of them. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me. You're welcome back anytime.
Brittany, hey, thanks for having me. I look forward to the next time.